Thank you everyone for joining. We'll be starting shortly. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Well, this afternoon here in the Caribbean, and good day to you for those joining us from across the world. And thank you once again for joining another Caribbean Actuarial Association webinar. Today, we're having a webinar called SOA Strategies for Success, where the main focus will be discussing the upcoming changes to the Associate of the Society of Actuaries education pathway. Next slide. Yep. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. For live interaction, you will notice that you will be on mute throughout the session. However, we do encourage you to submit your any questions you may have or comments via the Q&A window for the panelists. If you want to engage with the other attendees, you can do that via the chat window. The session is being recorded and it will be made available in its entirety on the CAA website. We may use elements and extracts from today's session in any newsletters, potential social media, and otherwise. Additionally, any presentation materials and recordings from today will be made available to all attendees via the CAA website, or you might receive an email blast from the CAA Secretariat. So thank you once again for joining. Another announcement. So we are on social media and we are very active. So I do encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Our name is Caribbean Actuarial Association. So I do encourage you, if you're not following now, to get updates on all of our webinars, our upcoming conference in December, our weekly newsletters. Follow us on our social media platforms and you'll be kept up to date. And finally, I'd like to introduce the team. So today, our technical support is Kevin Weeks, who's graciously assisting me right now, moving the slides along. Our host from the Society of Actuaries is Sophie Garcia. She'd have been instrumental in terms of securing the panel for today. So thank you very much. And your moderator is yours truly, Pedro Medford. And finally, in terms of our presenters, we have Stuart Klagman, Scott Lennox, and Andy Peterson. They're all at Society of Actuaries. They're well-versed. They have a wealth of knowledge to share with you today. If you have any questions, I implore you, now is your opportunity to ask them. And at this stage, I will hand over to Stuart, Scott, and Andy to get the presentation going.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. Can you hear me okay? All right, I will go ahead and thank you for the invitation to present to the Caribbean Actuarial Association and members, students, candidates. And we understand, given the virtual nature of this, that it's quite likely we have people watching from many different locations, not just those in the Caribbean, although that for those of us in the US, that seems like a very attractive place to be right now. just wish we could join you in person as opposed to having to do it virtually. Thanks again also to Sophie for helping arrange from the SOA side. Sophie directs our activities in Latin America, also in other regions, Middle East, Africa, in that area, and is involved with our ambassador program as well. So she works closely with me. I'm a senior director for international activities at the SOA, so look after everything basically outside of the US effectively at this point. We're happy to have Scott Lennox and Stuart as well joining, and they're both, well, all three of us are actuaries. Stuart and Scott both sit on our education department, and I'm, again, as I said, looking over our international activities. So I'm going to just give a couple introductory slides and then get beyond my material to get into the real heart of the information about the change. Let's go to the next slide, Sophie, or yeah, there we go. So from an SOA perspective, our board over the last two plus years has really been spending a lot of time looking at how the profession is evolving, what's happening to the actuarial profession, what changes are out there, how it impacts the Society of Actuaries as an organization, but the actual profession more broadly. And so we come up with what we call our, well, this whole initiative has been what we call our long-term growth strategy project. And coming out of this, we've developed what we're calling our diagnosis. And there's basically 6 areas here that we list as part of the diagnosis of the challenges, the critical issues that we face as a profession right now. And I won't go through these in detail. We have presentations that where we go through these each individually. Hopefully these themes, though, will ring true to you. Certainly we see a rise in the use of data science, and that's clearly that's a theme that will be reflected as Scott and Stuart present about the changes that we're making in our educational process. We have already, and we continue to make changes in that area. Certainly it's a competition in terms of, in terms of careers, that we know people who might otherwise have become actuaries are considering a career in data science separately. We know that the work of artificial intelligence, AI, is changing the nature of the work that we as actuaries do. Some estimates that we've seen suggest that 30 to 50% of the work that, say, entry-level actuaries do may be automated over future times. So that affects how we train actuaries. How do we develop them? How do we get them into the skill set they need? We also see that there's a changing nature of how people think about credentialing, even with the whole virtual world. The development of things through Coursera or these different certificate programs and so on. So there's a different way people think about credentialing, and we're trying to adapt that within our own system. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big issue, particularly in North America, but it's not solely a North American issue. And so that's something that we're looking at as an organization. How do we make our profession particularly more inclusive? And we also see that there's a lot of growth outside of North America in terms of the actuarial profession, opportunities for growth. The profession in the US and Canada is a very mature profession, but maybe not so in other parts of the world. And that particularly falls a lot under my responsibilities, the Society of Actuaries, as we think about how do we help the profession grow in other areas. And then we want to figure out how do we better engage with our candidates and members. And you'll see some information about that later in the presentation about some specific steps we're taking in the Society of Actuaries to try and really engage, particularly with our candidates. And so these are big themes. Today, though, what we're really going to focus is on education. So if we go on to the next slide, there are some areas where we're focusing education, professional development, global expansion, research, and so on. But today's focus is really on education. So we are really focused on, in this kind of new world of education, on looking at a modularization approach, or basically education that's designed as a series of modules that can be combined in different ways. And our aim in this approach is really to increase the amount of education in data science, AI, machine learning, and so on, with a customizable approach. We want to emphasize skills development and demonstrate skills at all stages in the education process. And again, Scott and Stuart will get into that in more detail. We also see a shifting of education systems to focus more on core skills and specialized tracks, and sort of thinking about what learnings our employers want to see on our resumes or our CVs as we go forward. We're creating new micro-credentials, and those micro-credentials are part of our core pathway. Again, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But our continued core or key aspects of what we do as the SOA is trying, focus on the associate and the fellowship exam credentialing pathways. And so those are our core products, our core aspects of what we want to focus on again today. So let me I think that's enough of preliminary stuff. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott and ask Scott to go through what's happening in terms of ASA curriculum changes. And I'm sure that's what you're all here today to listen to anyway. So let me stop talking, and Scott, it's yours.
All right, thank you, Andy. Thank you for having us today, and welcome. I'm glad to be here to talk to you about these changes. So, and on the next slide here, we can see a graphic that shows the comparison of our current pathway to the left and to our new pathway that's on the right. The different colors represent the various components of the pathway, the VEEs, the exams, the projects, e-learning components, and also the associateship professionalism seminar that comes at the end. So we often get, why are you making these changes? Don't we want to just keep these things the same forever? Well, these changes are being made to the curriculum to meet employer and market demand for actuarial training. And as Andy already talked about, and the emphasis that's continuing to be on predictive analytics, and that need to really bring more of that predictive analytics work and knowledge into the pathway for actuaries as they do their work in today and into the future. So that's one of the things that's driving it. The other thing that we constantly get feedback is that actuaries need to have more and improve on the soft skills. So these soft skills are these EQ and AQ skills. We talk about emotional intelligence quotient skills, which are social and emotional skills that help you make good judgments, and the adaptability quotient, the AQ skills, which is the ability to adapt and self-learn and continue growing and adapting. So these are the important skills that we continue to hear that actuaries need to have. So we're incorporating more of this into our pathway to help make candidates successful in their career as an actuary. So let's get into some of the details on the next slide here. The key decisions that the board approved are listed here. So the LTAM and STAM exams are being split into 3 new exams: the fundamentals of actuarial mathematics, and also your choice of either the advanced long-term actuarial mathematics exam or the advanced short-term actuarial mathematics exam. A new exam has been added, the advanced topics in predictive analytics. Again, we want to bring more of that analytics into the pathway. The one exam that's being removed is IFM. So much of the IFM material already exists in FaP. I want to step back a moment here. The IFM exam is being removed, but the material really isn't being removed. The material is staying in the pathway in some way. Much of it already exists in the fundamentals of actuarial practice, the FaP modules, and the other topics that are currently in IFM. One of them is going to the new advanced long-term exam, and the other topics will be covered in the fellowship tracks where those topics are most needed. There are 3 micro-credentials that are being added, introduced, that Stuart will talk about. And the overall goal here is, even though with all these changes and additions and deletions, the overall goal here is to not increase travel time for candidates. We're hoping to make this more efficient, but not increase travel time at the same time. Okay, next slide, please. So let's go through some of the details, what's staying the same and changing. Exams P and FM. Exam P has some topics that are being removed and or reduced, and this should possibly allow earlier accessibility to this exam. So university students can maybe take this at an earlier point in their university life. So that makes it a little bit more accessible for various students. The limited changes that are being made to this exam allow us to still have instant results for this exam. So that's very important for us to maintain that ability to give instant results. For FM, some topics are being transferred away, some are being removed. We're removing some redundancies in the pathway and eliminating some outdated content as well. And again, with FM, we want to maintain the ability to allow instant results as well. The draft syllabus documents are posted on our website. There's a separate page that highlights these changes, where all the changes that I'm talking about today, you can go to check out the various pathway components. For the actuarial mathematics exams, the FaM exam, Fundamentals of Actuarial Mathematics, will be a 3.5-hour multiple choice exam with an equal number of short-term and long-term questions. The goal with this exam is to eventually get to the point where we can do instant results. Obviously, we won't be able to offer instant results right away, as we need to build up the item bank of all the questions and have some kind of history to be able to understand how we can assemble the exams in such a way where we can give instant results like we do with P and FM. So at some point we will get to the ability to have instant results, but initially we will not have that available for this exam. The advanced long-term and the advanced short-term exams will both have the same format. They will both be written answer, and they will either be 2.5 or 3 hours. That has not been finalized by those two committees yet, but the idea is for them to be the exact same style of exam. So let's get into transition rules on the next slide. Thank you. So again, some minor changes to P and FM, but for these 4 exams, basically what you have credit for today, you'll have credit for tomorrow. So nothing's really changing for these 4. For the actuarial mathematics exams, this is where we've been getting the most questions as to how the transition works. If you have neither the LTAM or the STAM by the spring of 2022, then you will need to meet the new requirement, which will be FaM plus either the advanced long-term or the advanced short-term exam. So again, you don't need both of those. You will need one or the other. Your choice, probably you want to match that up to whatever fellowship track you're likely to take as well. If you have only LTAM by the time of the transition, you will get credit for the advanced long-term exam plus the long-term half of FaM. What you have outstanding will be the short-term half of FaM. And it works the same way for STAM. If you have STAM credit by the time of the transition, you will get credit for advanced STAM plus the short-term half of FaM, leaving the short-term half of the the long-term half of FaM still outstanding. The FaM-L and FaM-S halves will be available for 6 exam sittings, so that will be available until for until June of 2024. Those are only available for those candidates who, because of the transition, are missing half of FaM. And of course, anyone who has LTAM and STAM at the time of the transition has fully met the requirements of the new pathway, so they'll have nothing outstanding at the time of the transition. For IFM and the advanced topics in predictive analytics, this is where we've been getting the other questions. How does this one work? So the new pathway requirements, a very important point here is the new pathway requirements are met by having passed either IFM or the advanced topics in predictive analytics. So IFM doesn't give you credit for advanced topics in predictive analytics. What we're saying with the pathway is you need either of these two components to meet the requirements for the pathway. So if you do not have IFM by the time of the transition, then of course you want to have credit for anything, and it'll be your choice to take either IFM or the advanced topics in predictive analytics. The only thing to remember is that IFM will only be available through November 2022. If you have IFM, of course, by the time of the transition, you've completely met the requirement for this in the pathway. So you do not need to take both IFM and the advanced topics in predictive analytics. And the advanced topics in predictive analytics will be open for registration in January of 2022. For the e-learning modules, some of the content in the FaP introduces candidates to the actuarial profession. What we're doing is creating 2 new modules to do 2 things. One, we want to bring some of the FaP module content earlier in the pathway. And 2, we want to develop level appropriate EQ and AQ skills as well. And as a result of these 2 new modules, the FaP is being revised to be 5 modules instead of the current 8. Okay, next slide, please. So the various changes are intended to make the pathway more efficient for candidates. We've removed outdated content and redundancies, improved the arrangement of topics, and incorporated micro-credentials and expanded areas of AQ and EQ and the analytics. And I've already noted the timing of various changes, but of course you can refer to the website for all of the details on the timing of the various components. And with that, I will pass the stage over to Stuart.
Hello, everyone, and my thanks as well for joining us today to hear about the changes that we're doing. When Andy was giving his introduction, he talked about micro-credentials. So this slide says they're calling them recognition choices. So the idea here is a micro-credential is indeed a recognition of a certain level of accomplishment. So if we'll go to the next slide, we can see the 3 micro-credentials that our board approved earlier this year. Some things to notice about these micro-credentials: the components of them are all part of the existing pathway. So essentially, if you're on your way to ASA and choose to do that, then you will pick up these micro-credentials along the way. Or you can choose them to be your destination and say, what that they comprise is what I want to get from my examination work with the Society of Actuaries, and that will be when I'll stop. So each of them has a meaning. So the Pre-Actuarial Foundations micro-credential contains what we sometimes call the enabling skills. There really isn't any actuarial work in here. These are the subjects that you need to be good at to then learn how to do actuarial work, how to solve actuarial problems, but you don't get to see those problems at this phase of your education. So the financial math, the probability, and so on. And then a capstone module at the end, also called Pre-Actuarial Foundations module, to help bring about some of those AQ and EQ skills that have already been mentioned as being critically important for success as an actuary. So a person who completes these 5 components would earn the Pre-Actuarial Foundations micro-credential, could stop there or continue. And if you then add 4 more items on the right-hand side, you have now begun to learn about actuarial problems and how they're solved, in particular in the Fundamentals of Actuarial Mathematics course that Scott described. You get a chance to see common actuarial problems, both of the short-term nature and the long-term nature, and another module at the end to get practice in those models and solutions, as well as develop more of those EQ and AQ skills. Off on the side is the Data Science for Actuaries micro-credential. As also has been noted, the new pathway has a new exam, Advanced Topics in Predictive Analytics. So we now have a suite of 3 analytics exams: statistics for risk modeling, predictive analytics, and advanced topics in predictive analytics. Those who complete those 3 exams would be awarded the Data Science for Actuaries MicroCredential. So these are things you can put on your resume, things that an employer will look at and say, I've got that person has something of value, certified by the Society of Actuaries, and it represents a very particular body of knowledge that the holder of that microcredential has mastered. A few more comments then, if we go to the next slide. So I've said some of these things, so it's just a way to reinforce them. Recognize and demonstrates knowledge and skills. They're milestone markers. All of them were designed to count towards earning a designation, ASA, FSA, CERA, if that's your ultimate goal, and again, represent those distinct knowledge and skills. As we go to the next slide, I've also mentioned about AQ-EQ, signals to employers, but here's the last bullet that I haven't talked about. We want to be clear that a microcredential does not make one an actuary. In most jurisdictions, an ASA or perhaps an FSA does indicate that you're an actuary and you meet the local qualification standards to do actuarial work. These microcredentials do not make you an actuary, do not give you rights to sign formal regulatory documents or statements of actuarial opinion in your jurisdiction. Those are still reserved for our designations. And our final slide that I have before Andy will take it back again is what do you get? Well, again, we're going to be implementing digital badges. I don't have very many myself. I hear it's for more younger folks like them. I do. My Fitbit does send me a digital badge every once in a while when I've walked a great many steps somewhere. They do not expire or renewal. So think of these microcredentials more as like a university degree. Once you've earned the microcredential, it's yours for life. It's not something that can be taken away from you. It gives you an option to join the professional affiliate membership program if you've completed 2 of those, either of the second 2 microcredentials that I mentioned earlier. And I should also add, that's not mentioned on the slide, these microcredentials do not in and of themselves come with, I'll say, ethical responsibilities. Not that we shouldn't all be ethical in all our work, but there's no particular code of conduct from the Society of Actuaries for those who hold those microcredentials. Now, many who hold those microcredentials will still be candidates taking exams, and of course, will be held to the existing candidate code of conduct, but no new code of conduct or different one imposed on those who hold a microcredential. That'll be a different matter for the affiliates, which I'll now turn over to Andy to talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. So as Stuart mentioned, we are, well, I don't know, he didn't say any specifics, but I'm going to talk about the affiliate membership. So let's go to the next slide. And in addition to all these educational changes, we are rolling out some new options. And these are, as I mentioned early on, we talked about engagement with our members, engagement with our candidates. And these, we have 2 new affiliate membership categories, and these are about engaging with our candidates, with you all who are taking exams or even considering taking exams before you get to the point of actually holding either the ASA or FSA as a membership category for the traditional membership categories with the SOA. So as of actually about a week or 10 days ago, we opened this new affiliate membership, and it's open to anyone. Basically, the target is candidates, students, and influencers. So by influencers, we're talking about university professors, maybe high school math teachers, maybe even parents who have a student who may be interested in pursuing a career, or guidance counselors, or career counselors. Any of those people can join this this category. You'll see there's a link at the bottom of the screen. There's a QR code. You can use that to sign up. And basically, this is a no fee, no requirements for joining. but some nice benefits, and we'll get to that on the next slide. Yeah, so on the next slide, we talk about this. So what are some of these benefits? We intend to have a content library that will have sort of free access to different things, videos, events, some on-demand online courses that would deal with things like career planning, what's it like to be an actuary, soft skills training, how do you interview for a job, or different sort of guidance through the process of taking exams. There will be a mentoring aspect so that these folks who join as affiliate members will be able to sign up to have mentoring opportunities with actuaries who have completed ASAs or FSAs. And for those of you, I know I recognize a few names on the attendee list who are members of the SOA. So you have the opportunity to sign up to be a mentor, and there will be different types of mentoring opportunities, I believe. So maybe some group mentoring opportunities, but also what we might call flash mentoring, where it might just be a one-time meeting where a candidate gets an opportunity to talk with an actuary and just learn a little bit more about their journey, how they became an actuary, what they do, different things like that. So mentoring is an opportunity. In addition, there will be some networking opportunities, learn about the profession from actuaries, again, asking real-life questions, and assistance with navigating the exams and the pathway. So those are some of the key benefits. Again, whether it's students, parents, educators, we think that this will be a valuable opportunity. And did I mention it's free? There's no charge for it. So my sense is, if you're at all interested, if you know anybody who's at all interested in considering a career as an actuary, why not sign up? There's no downside to doing that. Okay, then the next slide takes us to a second membership category. And this one is what we call a professional affiliate. And by professional, what we mean is that this is somebody who has actually passed some exams and gotten a credential or a micro-credential. And specifically, you have to have had passed either the second or the third micro-credentials that Stuart just talked about. So either the Actuarial Science Foundations or the Data Science for Actuaries micro-credentials. So if you have either one of those, then you're eligible to sign up for this professional affiliate membership. In this case, this membership, there will be a charge for it. It will be a smaller charge than our existing ASA or FSA. It's quite a bit smaller, although those details are still being confirmed. But there'll be some of the similar benefits as what was with affiliate membership, but some additional ones on top of that this group will get. And so this new membership category will open in January of 2022, so in about 3 months. It'll take a little while for anybody to actually be eligible for it, because there's some of the components of those micro-credentials aren't actually quite available yet. There's the online modules dealing with sort of the ethical EQ, AQ skills. Some of those things are still, those will be rolled out in January, so that they'll be available at that point in time. And I want to stress, I guess, two things. One is this is an optional thing. So as Stuart said, the micro-credential, if you earn that, you get that. You don't have to do anything for that. This is something that you have a choice. So if you have that either one of those micro-credentials, you can then make a choice. Well, I want to join this professional affiliate membership and then pay the dues for doing that. And again, as Stuart, the second thing to stress is, as he also said, just by either having the micro-credential or having this professional affiliate membership does not make you qualified as a signing actuary. Again, those are things that we reserve, believe are more appropriate for the ASA or FSA designations, but not for either of these micro-credentials or the professional affiliate membership. I think that's all I want to say about that. And with that, that concludes the actual formal presentation. And so I'm going to turn it back to Pedro, who's going to take us through a Q&A. I see we've already got a good set of questions working, and so we'll kind of take turns. Well, I think Stuart and Scott are going to get to answer most of them, but I'll turn it back to you, Pedro.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Yep. Um, so as you know, the Caribbean Actuarial Association is not an examining body, but we thought this webinar would be important as many of our members are SOA candidates. So yes, it's not surprising that we do have a lot of questions in the Q&A. So to get the ball rolling, the first question is, what kind of AQ, EQ skills are you thinking about? So I think it may help the attendees if you kind of give a definition of what AQ and EQ skills are, and then you could kind of give some more in terms of what the SOA is trying to really target in terms of incorporating these in the exam changes that are being made.
So I can just kind of reiterate what I talked about in the presentation, and Stuart, you can add anything to that if needed. But so the director in our the manager in our department who looks after the e-learning modules would be able to give you a far more comprehensive answer than I can give. So but what I can tell you is that the EQ is generally referred to as emotional intelligence quotient, and these are the the social and emotional skills to help you make good judgments. So it's being able to make good decisions in terms of the analysis and the work that actuaries do. The AQ is the adaptability quotient, so the ability to adapt to changing situations and how you learn from that information and the self-learning aspect that comes along with that. So, Stuart, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, one of the things we hear a lot about that actuaries aren't very good at is dealing with ambiguity, being presented with situations where there isn't a unique answer. One of the things we found with our reliance, particularly on multiple choice math tests for the early part of the pathway, we tend to attract and reward people who are really good at finding that one unique correct answer to the question. And then the real world doesn't work that way, of course. You never have all the information you'd like to have to make the exact right decision in a situation. Part of the world we work in is full of uncertainties. That's what we do as actuaries, is try to cope with them. But in the end, you're going to be making a recommendation. And even though you don't have an absolute certain answer to give. The other thing we found that we hear from particularly high-level employers that when their actuaries come to them, they tend to give too many caveats. Well, I think this is what's going to happen, but I want you to know I had to rely on some data I don't quite trust, and the moon might be in the wrong phase next week, and all sorts of things that they think, well, I just have to say all these things, and then the frustrated person listening to it says, well, so what can I do? You've just told me all the reasons your answer isn't any good. Give me a good answer that I can rely on. And so that balance between a professional responsibility to reflect what did form the basis of your opinion, but still being able to have an opinion and express your point of view is something we hear actuaries need to do. And so we're trying to give those kind of case studies and environments into those early modules, so that, again, there's a notion that there's more than one right answer, and your goal is to find a good answer and defend it.
Okay, thank you for that, Stuart. Another question raised via the Q&A. So I know during the presentation you spoke about especially the preliminary exams, structuring them in such a way that persons can get instant results. So for a lot of students outside the US and here in the Caribbean, we do have a lot of paper and pencil exams still being done. I think in Trinidad and Tobago there is a Prometric center, but they're very limited spaces. So one query is being raised is, even if their paper and pencil is still being done, how comes it still takes 10 weeks to get the results? And the questions being answered from the perspective that they see it being a delay and a real disadvantage compared to our North American counterparts who know whether they fail or pass immediately. Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's...
So Pedro, none of us have the answer, but I'm emailing with someone who might. So could you give us one of the other questions, and we'll come back to this if I can get an answer, because none of us actually know the answer to that question.
Okay, sure. The next question, for candidates that have passed the short-term actuarial mathematics exam and need to sit the new fundamental actuarial mathematics L exam, what is the estimated exam cost, and when will study materials be available? Also, which companies will be offering study materials for the FAML component?
So the costs for the different components is one of the items that has yet to been finalized of the changes. So there's various stages when you make changes to exam system. One of the first things you want to do is get that information out there and let people know here's what we're changing, and then you work on the details and coming in terms of the syllabus, and the cost is one of the things that typically comes a little bit later. So I don't have an answer for you on that part of it. In terms of study materials, the FAM exam is really being constructed from the existing LTAM and STAM exams. So probably we're anticipating that much of the study material, the source material that exists right now for those two exams will be used for those for the FAM, the two FAM halves. In terms of what coaching actuaries or infinite actuaries or whatever these, those are not companies that are under our control or associated with the Society of Actuaries. So we can't speak for them and tell you what they will do and how they will prepare and when their material will be available for you.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question in the Q&A, if I do the pre-actuarial foundations and the actuarial science foundation MicroCredentials, how would my skills compare to the now discontinued certified actuarial analyst qualification, which was an alternative for that person, becoming a para actuary?
Yeah, they're really similar. Actually, it was kind of designed that way. So those two together, the pre-actuarial and the actuarial foundations, really do very closely mimic the content of the former actuarial analyst designation that we had previously. So yeah, very similar.
Okay.
The one difference that we like about this, I think that might make it more attractive, is this one uses the same exams that you use to get an ASA. And one of the problems with the CAA is those exams were off on the side, and if you pass those, they didn't give you any credits towards an SOA designation. So that's one of the reasons we think for a person who's interested in doing that, these micro-credentials might prove to be attractive.
And isn't it safe to say, Stuart, perhaps the level of depth and testing under the micro-credentials side is a little bit more rigorous than what was done on the CAA side?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Okay. All right. So next question. So, given persons will be receiving credit if they pass exam IFM prior to November 2022. So can exam IFM be used towards the data science for actuaries micro-credentials?
That's a very important question, and I'm glad it was asked so that we can talk about that. So it's not something we specifically mentioned when we got to the micro-credentials, but when I talked about the IFM exam no longer being part of the pathway, of course, is the ASA pathway. And so what IFM gives you credit for is it gives you it meets the requirement of the ASA pathway. So it doesn't give you credit for the advanced topics in predictive analytics. And because it doesn't give you credit for that new component, it won't give you credit for the data science micro-credential. So the only thing it gives you is it meets a requirement that is needed for ASA. And so part of what we wanted to do is not adversely affect any candidates who are currently in the pathway, so that any candidate that's currently in the pathway doesn't have to go back and get something that they yesterday didn't need to have. So that's a very important point. It does not give credit for the ATPA exam, and therefore it doesn't give credit for the data science credential.
Okay. So anyone who wants the credential, the data science credential, if they already have IFM, they still will need to write the new advanced predictive analytics exam.
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll try a different question here. Someone asks, can you please outline the professionalism ethical codes applicable to professional affiliate membership as opposed to persons who are opposed to, hold on, let me see if I can read this again. Can you please outline the professionalism ethical codes applicable to professional affiliate membership as opposed to the anybody can join affiliate membership?
How about I try that, and Stuart, you can supplement. I think the basic thing is that if somebody joins the professional affiliate membership, since they were requiring that they have some, either one of the second or third micro-credential, there will be a code of conduct that we expect people to adhere to. That is still in development. One could imagine it might look somewhat similar to this to the current candidate code of conduct or the code of conduct that all credentialed actuaries have to follow. Some variation thereof, but that's the idea, that if you are sort of using it, if you're using that professional affiliate membership, that there is some expectation that you are going to act as a professional and apply ethical standards in what you're doing, as opposed to the pure affiliate membership where it could be a parent or a guidance counselor who joins that. So there's no expectation of them doing anything actuarial in nature through that. So Stuart, anything you want to add to that?
I think that's pretty good.
Okay.
All right. So my next question, I'm going to phrase it like, I'll give a brief background in addition to the question that's being asked. So I know recently the SOA Education Board would have approved an extension to the deadline whereby anyone who became a fellow prior to, I think it was July 2022, would not have been required to pass, I think at the time, exam predictive analytics or any other future pre-associate requirements. So I know this was the deadline was extended to January 1, 2023. So if someone became an ASA prior to the introduction at exam PA, if January 1, 2023 comes around and they haven't qualified a fellow as yet, they will be required to write this pre-associate exam. So the question being asked is any consideration being given to extend this date, given that the current extension is only 6 months, and due to COVID and the continuing effects of COVID that are ongoing, now stretching over 2 years, can this be reconsidered and to be extended maybe an additional year to give those persons additional time?
The short answer is no. We did make the change for an extra 6 months for those who particularly did have to miss a sitting in the spring of last year. when COVID was at its peak. We have given our fellowship exams at every session since then on our schedule. And I do want to make an important point here. This isn't this is actually a generous thing we did. I know not everybody, in particular candidates, view it that way, but if we had done nothing, everyone would have been held to ATPA. By giving 4 and then extending it to 4.5 years to get your FSA. That's actually bending the rules. You refer to it as a pre-ASA requirement, but the requirements for FSA aren't ASA plus whatever's left. The requirements for FSA are the full pathway. So the moment, not ATP, I'm sorry, PA was added to the curriculum in 2018, it not only became an ASA requirement, it became an FSA requirement. But we decided, in fairness to candidates who were pursuing the FSA, we would not hold them to that new requirement. But there has to be a point in time when that expires. And we originally set it at 4 years, thinking that the vast majority of candidates can complete their FSA requirements in a 4-year span, extended it to 4.5. But the fact is, we also think that folks calling themselves fellows of the Society of Actuaries ought to know the predictive analytics material. And therefore, we don't want to wait any longer to make it a requirement for our newer members.
Okay, so I'm not sure if a follow-up question will be sent on that. So I'll just read a few more. One question here is, given the current shift to computer-based testing, both ASA and FSA, exam responses can now be sent to graders electronically, eliminating the need for hosting graded sessions and the exorbitant expenses that go along with it. Due to this, can we expect to see a reduction in fees in the near future? Not sure who wants to take that one.
I think the short answer is no, but I think you said that hosting grading sessions. We're resuming hosting grading sessions. It's already being planned. In fact, there's for the exams that are being given this fall, we do plan to hold in-person central grading as we used to do. So we're pretty much back to where we've been. And don't forget, yeah, the one thing we're saving with the Prometric administration is we're not shipping physical materials. It's all electronic, but there's a not small fee that we pay to Prometric for using their centers and for that seat and for them providing the manipulation of all the electrons involved in getting the exam here and there. So in the end, there's not really a saving that's taken place.
Well, a slightly different question, but still along the line of fees. It said many years ago, the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries used to be a lot more expensive than the Society of Actuaries. Now it's the other way around. Can you please discuss the Societies of Actuaries' approaches to supporting the profession's development in lower income and developing countries?
Andy, I think that's one you're working on.
Yeah, let me try and address that. We are aware that there are differences in our credentialing and the costs of our credentialing, but I think some of it actually does depend on which particular exams you're looking at. Certainly at the entry level, I believe our exams are the same or actually less than the IFOA exams. And I think, as hopefully people know, if you have to take the IFOA exams, you actually have to join as a student member, which I believe is roughly £100 annual fee, something like that. So there, at the entry level, I don't think there's a huge difference between our two pathways. That being said, I do understand that over the full credentialing pathway, there is a difference, and we're aware of that. We're looking into that right now. To be totally honest and frank about this, there is a difference in our pathways. We actually have our fellowship is more rigorous than the IFOA's fellowship right now. We have more things. We have the FaP. They don't have an equivalent to the FaP. We have the fellowship and missions course. They really don't have an equivalent to that fellowship and missions course. So those are pieces that contribute to our pathway being more expensive in the current context, but pieces that we believe are incredibly important to becoming you know, a fellow of the Society of Actuaries. That being said, that's kind of where we sit today. We are looking at this. We have a board committee that's looking at this, and we've done some work already in 2021 and will in the next early part of 2022. So this is something we're aware of, and you know, feel free to send me an email directly if you want to dialogue, whoever sent the question, about it more directly, because I love getting the feedback and understanding the issues more, but it is something that we continue to evaluate.
Okay. I have another question here, but I think I should be able to answer this one. But the question is, what are the SOA's plans, if any, to expand the testing capability for the predictive analysis exam in the region? So I know since the pandemic started, I know provisions were put in place by the SOA to allow remote proctoring to take place, whereby candidates in the Caribbean, once they secure a supervisor, would have been able to complete their predictive analytics exam on either a personal or a company computer while being supervised. So I'm not sure if anyone from SOA would like to add anything on top of that, or whether there are any plans to actually expand this even further, given that in many of the Caribbean countries, there are no Prometric centers. Are there anything else that we can look forward to?
So we're always in communication with Prometric, encouraging them to expand their network. But please understand, they're a separate company. They do what they do to make the money they want to make. We've sometimes been successful in getting them to add centers here and there. We've obviously been less successful than you or we would like in your part of the world. So that's an ongoing discussion with them. We have the best we've been able to do to maintain our firm commitment to fully proctored examinations is to have candidates or recruit a supervisor and use their own computer for taking the exam. And so that's the accommodation we've been able to make so far. But it's a challenge, but it's also one we're still committed to the computer-based exams as the model going forward. And so we're just do the best we can to serve people where we can.
Yeah, I think I would just add that we understand the challenges of that there are places where the Prometric doesn't have centers. And it's not just in the Caribbean, but there are other places as well where we hear that candidates want to take exams and it's not as conducive to them because they don't have the option to a Prometric testing center. And we are, as Stuart said, we try and pressure Prometric to add centers where we can and show flexibility there as much as possible. But in this pandemic time, though, even though the impact is maybe in some regions has been more challenging, the reality is, but as a region, as a global basis, the fact that we are using Prometric through this has actually allowed us to offer more exams through this pandemic period than probably would have had to been able to do otherwise, based on closings and quarantines and all the rules that have been in place in different countries and different rules. So I understand in a sort of a regional basis, it definitely impacts the Caribbean in a perhaps a disproportionate way. But on a global basis, the use of Prometric has actually been a positive for us in the sense of allowing us, particularly during these challenging pandemic times, to allow more candidates to take exams. I understand that's not a particularly satisfactory answer if you're sitting where you're sitting watching this, but that's kind of that's sort of the challenges that we as an organization face as we've been trying to work through these tough times.
Okay, and a similar question posed, even though it wasn't passed through the Q&A, is the SOA open to using other exam centers besides Prometric? Given that other professional examining bodies do use other vendors.
So there are other organizations that give exams. Unfortunately, part of our contract with Prometric is for a given exam, it's an exclusive contract to use their services. So that creates a problem. We also have to be, want to be a little bit careful because there are a lot of testing services out there that appear to have centers. But when we investigate them, we discover that their security provisions, their level of proctoring does not meet our standards. We've chosen to set a very high standard for proctoring for our exams, whether it's done by our own actuaries, as has been done in the past, or through Prometric with centers that do provide an extremely high level of security, making sure that the person who takes the exam is who they say they are, checking them to make sure they're not bringing anything into the exam room, being on camera the whole time. And we feel that's a very important consideration. So, if we do, whenever our Prometric contract is up, we do ask the other major vendors to put in bids to see if they want to be our vendor of choice. But the last go round, Prometric still had the broadest services of anyone we could work with, and meet our standards at the same time.
Okay. All right, so I'll give two more questions from the Q&A. I think there was a raised hand earlier. I think the person who raised their hand is actually one of the lecturers at the University of the West Indies. So if that person is still here and they raise their hand, I'll actually allow them to answer your question live. So another question answers, I understand why the SOA is making changes to the various pathways as the global expectations of our skill sets change and the growing need of other skills like data science. However, why did the SOA decide that persons who are already actively pursuing their ASA or FSA should be impacted by the pathway changes? Was there consideration to allow active students to complete their path as is, but require them to participate in MicroCredentials or microcourses instead of requiring new students to complete the new pathway? So in summary, why was there no consideration for grandfathering persons who would have already started?
Well, I think based on what Scott presented, we have effectively grandfathered everyone. Nobody has a new requirement as a result of these changes that they didn't have before or has to do anything extra. And in some cases, you'll actually do a bit less. Those with LTAM credit, for example, what will remain for them will be a smaller requirement than what they would have had we not made those changes. By making sure that IFM credit waived the ATPA requirement, we didn't add that requirement to anyone. The current FaP course is available to anyone who is along that to do that requirement rather than the new modules as we go into next year. So we think we've been fairly straightforward and generous in the transition rules. But the fact is we can't run multiple parallel systems at the same time. So the idea of having the resources to create the current exams for a dwindling pool of people who are trying to finish up those versus the new exams that we've introduced would be a challenge. And then, as with that issue we've talked about previously, you'd still have to have a cutoff date. We can't run an old system forever waiting for every last candidate to reach the end. So there'd always be a cutoff date regardless. So I think we've been aired, as we have done in the past, aired on the side of being generous in the transition rules and what we expect the candidates who are in the middle of the pathway will need to do. And there have been no changes to the fellowship pathway as a result of what we've talked about today.
We understand that it's, as students, it's always frustrating when you have a change in the system as you're working through it. I think, I mean, I don't know about Stuart, but I know Scott and I probably went through the system in probably about the same period of time, and I think I went through at least two transitions in my pathway, and you know, it was frustrating. I get it, but this is, you know, we try and make generous transition periods, and ultimately we understand that, you know, we as the SOA, if we don't evolve the exam system, you know, what I studied 20 years ago, if you were still studying what I studied 20 years ago, you know, the actuarial profession would be dead. So this is part of the continuous process of trying to make sure that we as an association and as a profession stay relevant.
Trust me, you're glad you don't have to study graduation of life tables.
Yeah, so I think one of the plugs being made, I'll try to pull together still is, you know, persons, yeah, they do understand, yeah, so it has that contract role Prometric. But, you know, given that we're looking to make the profession more inclusive, and, you know, given that, you know, given that centers aren't here in the region, you can imagine we do have students who have to book a flight, book hotel accommodation, to fly to another country to write an exam, fill out their pass, and they have to do it. They don't pass and have to do it all over again. As you can see, it could be very expensive, especially for those who aren't in a position where their employer is covering the fees and expenses. So it could dissuade a lot of persons from continuing in the profession, and we do see a lot of that in the Caribbean, where we have a lot of students coming out of the university, and you know, a lot of them end up going different paths due to different barriers that they do encounter. So I think one thing that has worked during the pandemic, and it would be good if the SOA can push it more, is more remote proctoring in those countries where there's no Prometric center. I think that will help. And also to allow students to benefit from the instant results that our North American peers do get, right? So knowing that you pass an exam, you can move on and start studying for the next, versus having to sit down and wait, you know, 2 or 3 months to find out whether you pass an exam or not and have to resit. It does impact the time it takes people to qualify. So if I was to make a plug on behalf of the Caribbean students, I'd like to make that
Okay,
point.
thanks. Heard loud and clear, Pedro. I know Scott and I have another appointment soon. We've already run over time, I believe, a bit. Is there anything else we need to do for this session?
Nope. So I'll just like if Kevin could move to the next slide. So there are a few more questions left in the Q&A. So what I will do is I'll share them with you. If you want to provide any responses, I can share them with the attendees. But at this stage, I'd just like to thank you all for taking the time out to meet with us. It's greatly appreciated. I'll first like to thank our president of the Caribbean Actuarial Association, Kyle Rudden, who would have put me in contact with Sophie. So, you know, he was there to get that initial ball rolling. So thank you very much, Kyle. And Sophie, thank you for your quick turnaround time, bringing the right people to the session. That was greatly appreciated. And generally, everyone in the CA Communications Committee, on the tech side, Kevin, all the help was greatly appreciated. And I also like to thank everyone who took the time out this afternoon to attend. As mentioned during the housekeeping, this session was recorded and it will be made available along with the slides you would have seen today. So thank you everyone and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Hey, thank
for
you.
the invitation. We appreciate it.